after I went off air yesterday afternoon after I did my video and talked about all the various issues that I'm just kind of like, wow, seeing the punditry, those are conservative political strategists who were just jumping on the hate Jamil Jivani train saying he's not a team player, he's terrible for the party, this, that, the other. I was just kind of like, whoa, that came out of nowhere. Didn't see that coming. Well, I sort of saw it coming, but it was much deeper than I realized it was. And so after yesterday's video, I took to X, posted about it, and well, received quite the feedback and perspective from many of you on this very issue, and we'll be discussing that today. On top of one of the people who expressed their views on this was none other than investigative reporter Sam Cooper. And I'm not gonna lie, I said it on the show quite frequently that Sam Cooper is growing increasingly impatient with where things are going in this country. And he's feeling like you and I more and more. He comes from a journalistic background. He was a part of that world for so long. And so he was always very reserved and conservative in terms of how he expressed opinion or expressed what was going on. But as the months continue to go on, years continue to go on, and seeing what is happening in our country, you can see he's getting increasingly impatient. He dropped a big truth bomb yesterday on X. And so we're going to be covering that. In addition to everything else we've seen, obviously Poilievre ended up addressing the Jamil Jivani comments yesterday. We'll be kind of covering that, the media spinoff and fallout to that scenario. And as well, there's been a lot of pushback on Mark Carney's defense spending announcement yesterday, where people are saying the normies who are, like us, who are like, yeah, I guess that's good. But the actual industry itself is saying, yeah, not too excited about it. And then obviously we have the issues that we all know is how deep Carney's in the pockets of some of himself and as well as some friends. And seeing who gets these contracts will be very fascinating to watch. So we'll be covering this and so much more. Welcome to the Elevate Report. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow. It helps us to get to new audiences. It helps people see that there is something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. And just before we get into our next story, I want to shout out the chat. Chat's popping off. You guys were in there getting into it, mixing it up long before we even went live today. So appreciate you guys doing that. You don't have to do it, but we appreciate you do. We have a lot to discuss today. And I already see a few of some homies in the chat already. We already got CatC8233 who says, why Hodgson making announcements quietly without MSM about pipeline April 1st? Yeah, that announcement came out, I think it was 5 days ago, talking about how he intends to meet all the requirements with Alberta by April 1st in regards to a pipeline. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know. I seem to be fairly under the radar. I do agree with that, but it is how it goes. That's how this all ends up going down. So let's start off with the elephant in the room, shall we? Pierre Poilievre addressing Jamil Jivani's comments in Parliament.
Have you spoken to Mr. Jivani about his comments?
Yes, I have.
And what was your message to him?
Well, my message is that Canadians are understandably upset about the tariffs and the comments that President Trump has made, and that we need to focus on what we can do here at home, what we can control in our own realm in order to be capable of having the leverage to negotiate tariff-free access to the U.S.
Frustrated that potentially this is like muddling the message here, the fact that you're the leader and he seems to be talking out of turn on this issue?
Well, he speaks for himself and I speak for the party.
Do you think his trip to Washington was helpful to Canada?
Well, my view is that he represents a riding that has been disproportionately impacted by the dispute. He's from just outside of Oshawa. 1,200 Ottawa-Oshawa residents have lost their jobs in part due to the tariffs. And I think that it's necessary for all MPs to use all the connections and work that they can in order to overturn the tariffs and protect Canadian jobs. So I encourage all MPs to fight the tariffs and stand up for Canada.
There were leaks out of caucus last week, and then there's also this issue with Mr. Jivani. I'm wondering how do you feel about how things are going in caucus?
Look, overall, I think we have a great team. We're the only party that's addressing the real issues that are affecting people's daily lives. And whether it's on affordability, the affordability of food, the safety on our streets, and the self-reliance of our economy, we have an incredible team of caucus members who have been fighting for those things, and we're going to keep doing that.
So what I find really fascinating right now is seeing the chat right now blow up. Everyone's very mixed, I'm finding, on this specific issue. A lot of people are thinking, yeah, Pierre Poilievre was definitely on point. His messaging, it was great. I think it was just the right amount of, hey, I'm not really going to address the Giovanni comments. At the same time, we're going to focus on what we're doing here as a party. And I appreciate what he tried to do for his constituents down there. And so I think, a lot of people are saying, yeah, I thought he did a good job of not throwing Giovanni under the bus, making some space, going a different direction, focusing on what the party wants to focus on. But leaving it at that. And then there's other people who are just like, Pierre Poilievre is a coward. He's scared. He's a uniparty. All this, that I'm seeing. There's a mixture of that happening in the chat right now, which I think is very, very interesting. And I am more so the stance of, I know how the media is spinning this. I know how the media is addressing this, and that, he's creating distance and he disagrees with the likes of Jamil Giovanni. I didn't actually hear at any point during that address that he said he disagreed with Jamil Giovanni. I think I heard that he said, yeah, Jamil speaks for himself. I speak for the party. That's where we're going to leave it at that. And it's just one of those situations is like, we look at it just is really interesting. We keep talking about Jamil Giovanni. We keep talking about him as a person, but no one addresses the issue of what is at hand. He said hissy fit. And what? What are we talking about here? Why? Who cares? What is so bad? And so it puts Poilievre in a bit of a tough spot here because he's in the midst of saying, and this is me just talking at this point, I don't think Poilievre disagreed at all with what Jamil Giovanni had said and where he was coming from. I think Pierre Poilievre was maybe not stoked about the firestorm it created. And yes, I'm sure there is an aspect of this where I'm sure the party itself is not very fired up. The fact that he went to Breitbart to do an interview, and that interview ended up getting published before any interview he did with any Canadian outlet. So that, I'm sure there was some annoyance there inside the party. But overall, what I got from Poilievre's messaging here is we're going to move forward. That happened. Okay. Who cares? We have some things to address here. One being cost of living. Two being grocery prices. Three being housing affordability. These are things we need to focus on right now. We can keep crying about this all we want. We move forward. And the one thing he hit on, which I think is very drastically important, and it's a point that the Conservatives have been hitting very well and will continue to hit on, is who cares about what Donald Trump says or does not say? Who cares? What are we going to do within ourselves so that we can be a strong nation? We can defend our own borders. We can take care of our own people. We don't need to rely on others to do well. What are we going to do to focus on those things? And that's where the focus should be. And that's kind of where things are at this present time. So we move on because, you had the reaction from the regular Joes, the regular people, or the regular suspects on this, where you had the Globe and Mail who did this opinion piece. This was from Andrew Coyne. Shout out Andrew Coyne, I guess. Says the post-Poilievre leadership race has begun. Here's the thing. And this was so telling that this is how they titled this. Very telling. Because the mainstream media, the establishment, so badly wanted Poilievre out, wanted him gone, wanted him taken out. And so you heard it. Remember, the months leading up to leadership review. Oh, man, he's not going to be able to hold on as leader. He's not going to pass his leadership review. Oh, man, this is going to be rough. All of that. Then as it got closer and closer in the weeks leading up to it, it was, we do expect him to win with flying colors. The verdict and the narrative around this changed slowly and quietly as they got into the leadership closer to the convention in Calgary. And so now to throw it up with this, saying the post-Poilievre leadership race has begun, is now creating a false narrative and false premise that now everyone's gunning for Poilievre's spot as leader. This media apparatus continues to try and undermine everything that happens in this party. Constantly. Constantly try to undermine Poilievre, constantly try to undermine any type of leadership, trying to get him out. This is disgusting. And so you go on here. He says, by now, nearly everyone has had a whack at Conservative MP Jamil Jivani's bizarre solo diplomatic mission to Washington. It was never clear what the trip was supposed to be accomplished. Mr. Jivani does not represent the government of Canada. He does not even represent his own party. There was nothing he could offer the Americans, nothing they could offer him. Certainly, it was hard to say anything good came of it. As far as Canada-U.S. relations are concerned, a couple of days after his return, Donald Trump declared his intent to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge amid a torrent of the usual anti-Canadian vitriol. And this is the stuff they're talking about, man. Like, this is the stuff that Canadians are getting so annoyed with right now with this media apparatus and the BS elbows up campaign that goes along with it. Well, yeah, you know, the only thing that came of it was Trump threatening the bridge, and then ignored the fact that Trump wanted to reopen negotiations. Okay, we move on. Perhaps the point was merely to remind Canadians that Mr. Jivani is an old college chum of the Vice President J.D. Vance. That would probably play a lot better if there was some evidence of the relationship having served the Canadian interests and not the other way around. What are you even talking about? Like, it is mind-numbingly frustrating to see these people write this junk and people eat it on up. Andrew Coyne is so out to lunch on so many issues, this being one of them. I'm not even going to continue on because then we have one of his colleagues, Robin Urbach, who wrote this. Jamil Jivani goes to Washington to advance Jamil Jivani's interests. They continue to try and create these narratives that the party's imploding, the party is falling apart. Jamil Jivani, people were even surfacing articles saying Jamil Jivani might cross the floor. What are we even doing here, man? What are we even doing here? They are so bent on trying to break apart the Conservative Party that really, truly, this media apparatus so desperately wants a one-party rule in this country. That's what they want. They want a dictator. I should say, no, I'll requalify that. They want a quasi-dictatorship, quasi-authoritarian. If you want one-party rule, if you don't want an opposition, if you want all parties to agree on the same points, you effectively want one-party rule. You only want one perspective, one way of life, and you end up becoming a mouthpiece of that very system. And that's what we're watching right now. These people, whether they agree, disagree, acknowledge it, or they don't acknowledge it, it doesn't quite frankly matter. They want a quasi-dictatorship if this is what they keep pushing and trying to push only one party being allowed to have their viewpoint. We're going to attack the Conservative Party. We're going to attack Jamil Jivani. We're going to attack Donald Trump. And we're just not going to question Mark Carney on anything he's doing. He's announced all these deals, but have we followed up on any of those deals? Have we followed up on any of those verbalized trade conversations? No, because most of them aren't happening. Most of them were just fugazi. That's what we're watching in real time. And this is how it always goes. And this is why I took to X yesterday with this. Because after my post yesterday, I talked about this issue of the weirdness around the Jamil Jivani story, like a lot. Before, I talked to several people leading into my show yesterday, talked to several people after my show yesterday, and then I was like, man, this has been bothering me a lot. Really, it's been bothering me a lot. Just seeing, again, I said, the usual suspects are going to rip on Jivani. Okay, whatever. But it was seeing the people who identify as being part of the Conservative Party who went in on him as well. And I just didn't get it, because what did he do wrong? What was the negative consequences of him going down? No one was able to answer that. And that's why I wrote this. Scanning social media over the last 48 hours has left me confused. The elbows up crowd being upset that Giovanni's trip to DC was predictable, but seeing conservatives take their pound of flesh has been bewildering. I've yet to see one individual provide one negative consequence of JJ going down there. I've seen a lot of emotion, a lot of denouncing, but little of the evidence of what he did wrong aside for simply poke a very real insecurity for Canadians. I'm sure the comments will not disappoint on this one. And quite frankly, they didn't disappoint. There's a lot of people who had some very interesting perspectives on this, but for the most part, people agreed with this, where my head's at with this one. It's a weird one. And Sam Cooper took this and added to it. And I really appreciate what he had to say on this. And I think this was, I was like, wow, he's had enough. He said this: isn't it the same scenario of Poilievre needing to walk back his own accurate statements that the RCMP are politically neutered because he spoke a bit broadly, given the media and the Liberal Party of Canada, commentariat a hole to throw him? Arguably, same dynamic with Giovanni. A loose word or two on a soundly stance point. Carney has failed to negotiate with the U.S. and get a needed deal as he pledged, in any rational view, and got in bed with China. How can't you criticize that? The CPC scared of its own shadow right now because the Canadian electorate has collapsed into one-party land and geopolitical illiteracy, too easily psyoped, too easily manipulated by talking heads. I read that and I was like, oh my gosh. He's not wrong. And this is the issue I have, is especially with the likes of the PPC crowd and all that, lots of uniparty. And I understand that I understand that sentiment to a degree. I do. But the issue I have with people yelling uniparty all the time is it's such an American take. It's such an American framing of our issues here in Canada that are very different. We have similarities, but things are drastically different in how we do things politically here in Canada versus how they do things in the States. And that's why I'm like, it kind of seems like a lazy characterization, if I'm being quite honest with you. However, what I'll say is what Sam Cooper said at the end of this is, I think, hit the nail on the head the most. And that's the issue that we had, is that the Canadian electorate, meaning the voters, has collapsed into one-party land and geopolitical illiteracy. And to that, I do agree. We have a vast majority of people here in Canada who really have serious, like, Trump has got to end. He's going to conquer us. U.S. is going to line up troops on our border, and they're going to come into our country, and they're going to take us over. People keep talking about that. We have politicians who keep pushing that. We have, a neighbor who's threatening our sovereignty. No, they're not. But apparently you took something very seriously that you shouldn't have, and you've pushed that as a part of and infused that into the Canadian mentality. And here we are. And on top of that, and this is always the critique of Americans when I growing up, is that Americans never really did a good job of teaching their youth, their students, of what happens outside of American borders. That's just kind of part of the American education system. That was always the joke growing up. However, and Canadians love to just kind of dunk on Americans with that. You guys are so stupid. That was always the Canadian mentality. However, in recent years, I'm learning that we're no better here in Canada. We know things that are happening outside of our borders, but we have no idea how geopolitics works. And I think that's the really the brain dead take of all this at the end of the day. That elbows up crew who, let's take one for example. Let's take Mr. Andrew Coyne, for example, shall we? Let's have some fun with this one. All right, this man's got a Ukraine flag, Georgia flag, Israeli flag. I can't remember that one in the end there. People like Andrew Coyne will be very soft on their takes on China, but very strong on Russia. All right? Very strong on these folks. but will conveniently ignore the idea that China's been funding Russia's war with Ukraine. Very clearly, that's been happening. We won't talk about that, though. Yeah, we should do more trade with China. We should bring them closer into Canada. We should be doing this. Even though there's evidence of all the different ways that China's been very hostile with us, yeah, we should bring them in. This is what I'm talking about here. This is the complete and utter lack of education and laziness of many here in our country. And that is, I think, what the conservatives are truly are fighting right now. There's not I don't believe right now, at least with Poilievre leading the Conservative Party, I have a hard time moving into the uniparty direction on this. I'm just not seeing it. However, I am seeing this molding of the Canadian population to all hate the United States. And more people are buying into it by the day. So I'm learning. That has been the part that's been the most concerning for me and has put the likes of Pierre Poilievre in a very tough spot. Even so, where you have the likes of CBC who made this their headline. Poilievre disagrees with Conservative MP's anti-American hissy fit comments. We watched the clip. He never said that. He barely even really acknowledged it. He said, yeah, Jamil's going to speak for himself. I'm going to speak for the party. But CBC took that as him disagreeing with him, even though those weren't his words. It's not what he said. But this is stuff we're pushing. We're not really getting into the nitty gritty of what Mark Carney announced yesterday, which we will be doing here shortly. No. We're going to get into Jamil Jivani. Again, a member of the party that is not in government. That's what we're going to do. And that's why I feel like, as I said, puts Pierre Poilievre in a tough spot because you have so much of the population that really is on the hate Trump train. And I've read, and this is the other issue with like parts of the Conservative Party that people I've been seeing posting about this, is the Conservatives need to meet the moment. They need to read the room. They need to take a stance on hating Donald Trump if they want to win another election. That's what's being pushed right now in some conservative circles. And to that, I confused because you want to base a whole campaign on a lie. And a very unhelpful lie at that, because it's not helping our country do any better. It's just making our country more bitter, cynical, and without a trade deal, leading to more people losing their jobs. Yeah, not really interested in that whole mentality. I don't really get it. But we move forward here. We move forward. Because even Viva Fry was jumping in on some of the fun as well. Said, supporters of Trump equals enemy to Canada. Supporters of Chinese Communist Party Xi equals Canadian patriot. LOL, this is Orwellian. And this was, Troy Westwood, who's a left-wing account on X, says, if you support Trump, then I and other proud Canadians should view you as an enemy to Canada. It's like, okay, like, sure, I guess you can view it that way. And that's fine with the left wing. Like, what do you consider to be a supporter of Trump? Is it someone who's like, hey, I can see where the U.S. is coming from. Maybe we should grow up. Is that viewed as being supportive of Trump? What does that even look like? So it's these left-wing accounts that are just so unhinged. And it's been bleeding into conservative circles, as we saw with the Jamil Jivani thing yesterday. And that's the part I found extremely, extremely weird. And then Sam Cooper dropped this morning, which I thought was even more fascinating. He was addressing the issue of Mark Carney's latest appointment to deal and work on the U.S. file and trying to get a trade deal done. He wrote this about Janice Charette, who Jason Kenney wrote that the Blame Canada crowd is angry with the appointment of Janice Charette to lead trade negotiations with the U.S. when they are not angry. When are they not angry? He said. Some facts. Madame Charette actually started her career in Ottawa as a Conservative political staffer. She served as deputy minister in some of the largest and most complex government departments. She was appointed clerk of the Privy Council, i.e. head of public service and top advisor to the Prime Minister and Cabinet by Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper. She was then appointed to Canada's second most important diplomatic head of mission role as High Commissioner to the Court of St. James, i.e. representing Canada in the UK. She was then reappointed clerk at PCO, the first person ever to serve in the highest role, and he goes on and on and on about all her accolades. He finishes off saying, Canada will be served well by having someone of Madame Charette's ability and experience in such an important role. And Sam Cooper said this, counterpoint, she's one of the small circle of bureaucrats that effectively let the CCP attack the Conservative Party in elections, did not intervene, and effectively provided cover for Trudeau, who she had to know was China's favored leader, as is Mark Carney. How does that look? Great question. And if you want to talk uniparty aspect, sure, we can talk about this. Is what the past couple of days have taught me, and I've known this for a while, but I think it was the most obvious yesterday. And I was like, okay, this is a lot more pronounced than I even realized it is. There are insiders and there are outsiders. The insiders have been in and around Ottawa for a very, very long time. And then you have the likes of Jason Kenney, who's been in Alberta and, but still identifies himself as a part of that Ottawa crowd. And they keep pushing these ideas. And that's what taught me about the Jamil Jivani thing, is regular people, at least regular people in the Conservative Party or around the Conservative Party were saying, yeah, I appreciate Jamil Jivani did. And what he said was true. Where was the lie? What are we upset about here? People having just a rational perspective and a rational understanding of what was going on with this. And then you had, again, the Ottawa types, the conservative strategists and politicos who just were tearing into them and leaving people like you and I very, very confused. And this is what I said about Charette yesterday was, yes, she has a very decorated background, very talented, done a lot in her career, but she's a part of the establishment. She's a part of that crew. And Sam Cooper called it out right here. She's one of the small circle of bureaucrats that effectively let the CCP attack the Conservative Party in elections and has not helped in trying to protect our elections from foreign interference. On top of that, pushed for the invoking of the Emergencies Act that has now been ruled that it was not constitutional to use. It's the small group in and around Ottawa, them against the regular folk. And that's it. And that's what we're seeing. And so as we will be taking a natural break here, we go into more so what's been going on with Carney's defense announcements. We'll address the chat. Lots happening. I've been seeing a lot of activity in the chat today. All right. This is great. I love when this happens. When I can't get my super chats to load up. Here we go. Jessica says, Don Cherry, say his name. He got the Order of Ontario. He did. And that whole interview or interaction at the press conference with Mr. Doug Ford being asked about Don Cherry, should he get the Ontario or the Order of Ontario? And he's like, yeah, I think so. I was like, man, you can't even answer that question with any type of authority. Of course he should be getting the Order of Canada, for goodness sakes. What are we talking about here? Rav Buffalo says, what's the difference of Jivani's visit when Democrat senators and Murkowski met with the Canadian government recently? Canadian media has a double standard. Yes, dude. That's a great point. To even think about that aspect. Yeah. I mean, I think the difference is there a difference? I think the difference is with those individuals coming up, they do have a role to they have a role. They have decision-making power to a degree. However, I guess in some ways, so it's a little bit, so being a Democrat senator or being a senator in general is a bit more of an elevated role than a Canadian MP. Sure, so there might be a debate there. But that is a good point. People coming up here to have discussions with people of a party that is not in power. Like that's like the Republicans control the Senate, they control Congress, and they control the executive branch. So in some ways it would be similar. It is fascinating. Sorry. You caught me, Rav Buffalo caught me in real time actually thinking about that more. I'm gonna think about that more. I really appreciate that you bring that up. -1-2 says, when it looks like 90% of the media is on the liberal side, that 60% plus are voting for leftist parties. Is it not just time to leave? ? It feels like Canada is just irredeemable at this point. Interesting statement. I know it can definitely feel that way. However, the one thing I'm holding on to right now is, yes, I definitely feel in the minority in this country of how I feel about having a respectful, grown-up conversation with our neighbors of the South. But he called us the 50. Move on. Mexico moved on. Mexico's moved on and is doing has gotten some great deals and exemptions with the United States. They moved on. Why can't we? Why can't we have a mature relationship with their neighbors of the South? Oh, well, they're not being mature. They need to grow up. Okay. You can think that's the reality and you can think that's true. What prevents you from growing up and having a mature stance on this? What have they done that's keeping you from being mature? That's the question I have. That's the issue. AJP for 231, who's also a member. That's awesome. The MSM was going to manipulate the story no matter what. So sick of these people. Yes, I do agree with that. And I was expecting it to happen no matter what. It was more so pockets of the Conservative Party going in on him too. That's the part I didn't expect the way it did. I'm a conservative boomer, said this. You'd think that the libs say has no effect. Fair enough. I'll leave that there. Marcolon Blanco says, the longer conservatives sit behind your keyboards, the faster you get silenced. Only images of massive amounts of people peacefully displaying themselves in public will work. Conservatives are the majority, but easily stupid or outpid. I don't know. I think there's something to be said about that. However, I'm trying to think about this a little more thoughtfully. Needs to be more movement from conservatives, and that's stuff that I'm working on behind the scenes at the moment. And I want to see more movement from conservatives. I'm not talking about the party. I'm just talking about people who want to see change in this country. Like there needs to be some significant grassroots establishment. Like we kind of push things forward. That definitely needs to happen. I don't know the classic, get out in the streets and protest. It could work. I don't know if it would. Not in this case, because you have to be a lot more strategic in Canadian culture now. Because now, anytime there is some type of movement or a protest of some sort, it easily gets branded whatever they want to brand it. We saw this during the convoy. And so in the convoy, my co-host Reg has brought this up multiple times. The convoy was the last time, was essentially kind of sealed the fate of what protest was in this country. As soon as you had a protest that the government disliked, they stamped you out real quick when they wanted to. And I think that was when we learned as Canadians, we had to be a lot more creative in how we oppose government. And that's what I learned. Just Me Nicole says, we live in dangerous times, according to liberals at least. I agree, but they are the dangerous ones causing it. I appreciate that, Just Me Nicole. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Mark Lombonco, Coming in again. Oh man, this is where I'm loving. Mark's fired up. He's on the beach in Naples, Florida right now, and he's fired up right now. Maybe he's enjoying a few drinks this early in the morning. Who knows? I'm just kidding. No, that was a joke. That was a joke. But he says this: you guys are effed. If you think America's your problem and being anti-America is your answer, the dumbest ish I've ever heard in 62 years. Oh man. You know what? I think that's the issue that a lot of us are feeling right now. Is we as Canadians just want to focus on getting things done here and taking care of ourselves, including securing our own borders, which we'll be discussing here shortly. However, we're just making it about pointing our finger at everybody else, but addressing the issues that we need to have addressed. Homebred Cat 7 came in and gifted 50 memberships to the homies. Holy smokes. Let's go. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. That's huge. Jessica asks, any fun interviews coming up? Well, yes, there are. There are some fun interviews coming up. And talks with a few different people at the moment, and looking forward to getting those things going. Jordan English says, holy ish, homebred. That's gangsta. It's true. John McGarry 335 says, elbows up, boomers need to stop watching Canadian Bacon on loop and wake up to what they're doing to Canada. I'm learning more so by the day. Yes, the boomer crowd has definitely a solid base under Carney, but I'm starting to learn there's other parts and other age groups, demographics that are leaning more into Carney's message and view how Canada should operate. And that, I think, has been more so concerning lately. Karen Law 43, new member. Let's go. -1-2 says 8 million Venezuelans left after 25 years of Chavism. I can see just as many people leave Canada after 15 plus years of liberalism. I agree. I think that's the part that makes me the most nervous, if I'm being quite honest. Proud Grammy says something people in the Conservative Party are forgetting is they are working strategy, helping Liberals to prove they are willing to help and show Liberal voters that even with the help, they aren't getting it done. Yes. So Proud Grammy brings up a good point. That is kind of the Conservative strategy at this point in time. I think the one thing I want to make very clear as I've been talking today is I haven't seen anyone in the Conservative Party. They've been very quiet. They've been very quiet about the Jim Giovanni issue, the party itself, in terms of the MPs, been very quiet. It's more so those who are former staffers, those who are political strategists, those who are in the media apparatus who view themselves as being conservative. Those are the ones I've been the most concerned with their rhetoric. Party itself, like though the MPs who are front facing, who are in the party, in caucus meetings, meeting with Polyev, they've been very quiet, and they're focused on their mission right now, which is address the 3 core issues that Carney said he was going to fix, and he has not put a dent in it at this point. He's doing a lot of fugazi right now, but the Conservatives are trying to okay, let's work to get these 3 things fixed. Okay, let's bring down energy prices. Let's do that. Let's bring down grocery prices. Let's do that. And let's bring back housing affordability. We'd love to see that. That's what the focus is right now. And I think that is the right focus. And unfortunately, this Jamil Giovanni thing, the Liberals and those who claim to be helping the party have been making this a very weird distraction. Jessica says, I actually love bacon, though. Yes, bacon is good. Bacon is good. All right, let's move on with the show here, folks. We got some more stuff to cover because it's getting very interesting out here, okay? We got David Coletto dropped this today, which... All right, hold on, okay, folks? You got to hold on for dear life before I show this. David Coletto runs Abacus Data, dropped some numbers on us today. And it's not going to make you feel better. However, it's going to be another piece when you're arguing, or shouldn't say arguing, are debating with somebody about the validity of some of the issues and concerns we're having around mass immigration in this country, okay? This was a snapshot, okay, of what's going on here. Holy jumping. David Coletto says, to see our population growth in comparative perspective like this is something. And it's mapped us against, a lot of the different European nations. And Canada's in an interesting spot. So you have all, you look at these European nations between 2000, their population in the year 2000 versus their population in 2024, and seeing the different changes in this, that, the other, and how much it's changed and how much it's increased over time. We have Germany, it's increased the least actually over time to by 1.7%. And the most on this list being Sweden, which is increased by 19.1%. Okay. So this is what we see from the European nations. Okay. So I want you to kind of take some time, take it in, analyze the 2000 population versus the 2024 population, the change over time. Okay. The numbers that have increased. Got it. Cool. Well, then we're going to pull up Canada. Canada has increased by 34.6% in 24 years. $34.6%. And right now, it's probably closer to 44 million, I think, now in 2026. I know we're going off the official census numbers here, but this is something to behold. And the issue is a lot of this took place during the last 10 years. Conservatives had when Harper was in power, the Conservatives had a very pragmatic approach to immigration. And this was one thing. I had friends who were immigrating here from the United States, and they were stunned by how thorough and how hard it was to immigrate to Canada. People were talking about how hard it was to immigrate to the U.S., and it paled in comparison to the Canadian system. Mainly because, we have healthcare that, tries to cover citizens so you don't have to cover a bill when you go to the hospital. So you have to be very protective of that system and make sure you build and have an immigration system that takes that into account and brings in people who are highly skilled that will contribute to your country. It's very thought out. We were bringing in anywhere between 300 to 400,000 people a year at that point in time of highly skilled workers into Canada. And the Liberals just turned that up to 11. And a lot of what their policies are is what led to this. This is wild. 34.6% is essentially, it's just not sustainable. That's what I'm looking for. It's just not sustainable. And the minute you brought that up, even just a year ago, 2 years ago, racist. Even in some cases, they'll call you racist. But it's becoming more of the norm amongst the Canadian population, realizing, oh, shoot. Yeah, we probably should kind of rein in our immigration right now so that we can focus on building up our infrastructure and taking care of business and taking care of our own at home. Probably should focus on doing that. Those are some wild numbers. I wanted to show that because I just caught that right before I went live today. I thought this was very, very eye-opening. So, but we move on here, folks. We move on. So, we had Mark Carney's defense announcement yesterday, right? Which I think overall was a fairly good. What was I think about this yesterday? It was on the surface, it sounded good. It felt hopeful. Oh, we're finally going to be investing money into our defense sector. This is awesome. We love to see it. And a lot of people are just like, yeah, there's no problem with it. Except for those in the defense industry. And as well, especially those who watch Moose on the Loose, is where the money is going is the other issue. So there was some big promises made. There was a promise of $6.6 billion into this Defense Investment Agency, which is a new agency that Mark Carney is putting together and looking to bring in $180 billion of procurement of direct spending on new hardware and military equipment within 10 years. $290 billion spend over the next 10 years dedicated to defense-related capital investment, including Arctic bases, tech hubs, and housing for personnel. And then $45 billion for annual resilience, an ongoing yearly investment for domestic resilience, which includes cybersecurity and Arctic sovereignty operations. Again, on paper, this all sounded really good. It was a big boost, a big increase, and a lot of people, especially in the military, are just like, yeah, this is awesome. Let's keep going with this. The issue, though, is this is nothing new. Justin Trudeau and other governments have promised, specifically Justin Trudeau's government, have promised lots of spending on military over their time. And what would happen is they would announce these big sweeping announcements like, we're putting X amount into military and we're X amount into this, that, the other. And then the money would get to the bureaucrats who were to disperse the money to figure out the areas where they needed to spend it. And they couldn't agree and couldn't figure out where to spend it. And then the money was returned to the Treasury, and that money never made it to the Canadian Armed Forces. That's what was happening. So naturally, when this announcement goes, we're going to spend this much, and we're adding a new bureaucracy, everyone's like, so all the things that were a problem before, you've made even worse. It was already slow. Decision-making was already slow, and now we're adding another bureaucracy into it. This money's never getting to the armed forces, for goodness sakes. Like, never getting to the armed forces, for goodness sakes. Even the likes of Aaron O'Toole, who's been going off on the conservative, some aspects of the Conservative Party these days, had this to say. He's Mr. CAF, he's Mr. Canadian Armed Forces, and I'll be honest, as much as I didn't like Aaron O'Toole, one of his strengths as a leader was his focus and desired focus on the Canadian Armed Forces. So it made sense for him to come and talk about this, and this was his perspective on the whole thing.
What if in 3 years, theoretically, there will be a different U.S. administration, and if they return to the old world order of how things used to be, do you think Canada will retreat from the direction they're going in right now in terms of this real emphasis on the military?
You've asked the key question that I hear in my business dealings in Europe. Everyone is wondering, is Canada really in this for the long term? Are you going to be self-reliant? Are you going to build defense companies like CAE, where Prime Minister Carney announced this today, world-class, world competitors? Is this our new path, or are we just doing this for the next few years of Trump?
Now.
Yeah, this is what everyone is asking, and it's why I think, if I can be critical of the government, we don't need more reports, agencies, white papers, talks. They need to start spending dollars. They need to start buying equipment, buying services, supporting innovators in Canada, so that private capital and our allies will see, yeah, Canada is serious. They're not just releasing documents, they're actually purchasing things, and they're showing up more. And so I do think that's Prime Minister Carney's intention, but we have to be in this for the long term, because there is no return to the traditional rules-based order, because 20 years ago, China didn't have a blue water navy. They are building islands in the South China Sea where a quarter of the world's trade flows through. You're seeing tensions in the Indo-Pacific, a war in Europe reaching 3+ years. You're seeing still migration crisis, food insecurity in Africa. We're living in challenging times, and we have to be willing to defend ourselves, but also defend our interests and our values on the world stage. So that doesn't mean replacing American equipment with Chinese, for example. It means being selective. And I like how this document said, build it ourselves, partner with allies, before just buying it on the world market. I think we really need that builder, that innovative mentality now as a country.
So say what you want about Aaron O'Toole, but I agree with a vast amount of what he talked about here. Is everything I addressed beforehand is we're bringing in new bureaucracies at this point in time. It's going to likely muck things up even more. We need to start spending dollars and being thoughtful at how we spend those dollars and getting those to our Canadian Armed Forces and getting things done. This is what we need right now. And the question to start this off, which is the question everyone's having, is Canada only investing, is trying to mask their investment as if just to please the American government, just to appease Donald Trump? Is that what's happening? Or are you actually taking this seriously? And that's the question all of us as Canadians have been having about this Liberal government for far too long. Remember when Justin Trudeau, before he stepped down, he appointed a fentanyl czar, who of whom we haven't heard from at all, and who even admitted himself in meetings with American officials saying, I have no power. Remember that? This Liberal government has had such a huge track record of saying a lot and doing nothing. And this is leading to that. And I think, for example, I will say this. I said this about the MOU with the Alberta pipeline as well. Is it will get done. It will get done. These projects will get done, but will get done for far more money than they need to be getting done for. And they'll get done only because of who gets rich at the end of the day and the connections they have. If you don't want, go watch Moose on Loose's video from this morning. He talks about it there. And these are things we're going to continue to dig in and look into. But for the most part, the things that really are impactful and need to be dealt with, I'm not confident are actually going to be taken care of here. Like them, I would like us to continue spending money on our military so we can protect our own borders. That would be great because our military has been decimated underneath this Liberal government. And I have a hard time trusting that same party to try and rebuild it after they destroyed it. But there's one last aspect that Aaron O'Toole kind of dives into too, which I think is something that's important to keep in mind.
I thought it was a very good document. It certainly follows on his speech from Davos saying that the world has changed, the rupture, and Canada needs to be more self-reliant, more independent. We need supply chain resilience. We can't just depend on U.S. companies anymore. And we need to build something called sovereign capability, something that some of us have been talking about for years, to be more independent of other global trade wars and things like this. So from a defense standpoint, this document gets us started on that path. There's still some bureaucracy and legislation to come, so I think there needs to be a bit more urgency than what we see, but it's a very good first step. I thought it was
It's a very good document, and that sums up this government right there. They wrote a lot of great words, but I'm not too enthused about if there will actually be action behind it. And when that likely happens, here we are. Because Mark Carney, there's been a lot of announcements Mark Carney has made. And there's been there has been some action, but little action in comparison to the words. And that has been the concern in general. Especially when someone like him runs on, we're going to operate at speeds that have never been foreseen. Like, that's that. He ran on that. America wants to own us. They want to break us. We need to stick it to them. These are the things that he ran on. And there's been a misalignment between his rhetoric and his actions. And I think that is where we're at. As I said, in general, overall, I'm loving to see that we're putting that kind of money into our military because we desperately need it. We desperately need it. However, I'm not going to be holding my breath. Not going to be holding my breath. And even the likes of James Bazan came on and discussed this, who's a Conservative MP, discussed this very issue of what is happening and his perspective of what you need to keep an eye out with this deal or with what this announcement is.
Last decade, they have failed to deliver previously. They have allowed over $10 billion to lapse in spending. If you look at the state of disrepair within the military equipment of the Canadian Armed Forces, because of the lack of seriousness and political leadership coming from the Liberals, we have only half of our fleets, whether it's Army, Navy, or aircraft, that are able to be deployed, that are serviceable. That means that the rest of them are sitting around in disrepair, need to be overhauled, need to have proper maintenance done, or worse, they're actually already been pushed to the side and are sitting out in the back getting recycled, or as we know with our Kingston-class maritime patrol vessels, they're just sitting in furlough, all tied together, floating alongside our bases in Halifax and Esquimalt.
I think a lot of Canadians are a little dumbfounded at how we got to that place. And so when I ask, what do you see as the biggest problems with implementation of this strategy, it kind of casts back to what was the implementation problem over all of these years. Is it one thing? Like, what is it that is holding all of this back so effectively when everybody seems to agree it's something we want to do and should do?
Look, I look back and when we had success in Afghanistan under the Conservative government, then we were able to go out there in a matter of months buy and deliver new C-17 aircraft, new Hercules tactical aircraft, 100 new Leopard tanks, replaced our LAV 3s with LAV 6s, and were able to buy Chinook helicopters in a matter of months. It took political leadership. And, instead of adding more bureaucracy, which we're seeing in this defense industrial strategy, of having not just another agency run by an individual that doesn't have a military background, other than, the only thing in his resume is that he's a former Goldman Sachs banker with Prime Minister Carney.
Calling it out. It would be great to have people who have military background dealing with this. No, we're just going to have another banker involved in dispersing cash on all these issues and figuring out where to spend that money. That's where we're at. And I want to be fair. I do want to be fair. This will be the last thing before we end off today. This is a lot of the criticisms and the cautiousness that some people feel about the announcement. Then you have the likes of, we have did I even pull it up? I don't even think I pulled this up. Let me see here. Sorry, folks. I thought I had this. There it is. So we have the likes. We're only going to watch like the first minute and a bit for this, but retired General Tom Lawson, former Chief of Defense Staff, was expressing how actually this was a very positive move and a good thing. So let's hear the other side of like how this is a positive move and where things are going.
Been laid out. And the strategy has some audacious stretch goals, as you just suggested, which I love. I mean, that's great. Even if we miss that, 70% of Canadian defense dollars going to Canadian defense industries within a decade. Even if we miss that, if we hit 50%, it will be incredible. And it's time for Canada to do really big things. But along the way, there's a lot of things that have to line up. Venture capitalists and banks have to pick winners and losers that they're going to bet on, or at least entrepreneurs, small, medium, and large, that they're going to bet on. Some of them won't make it. Some of them will return huge investment, but that's got to happen. Entrepreneurs have got to decide to invest their efforts in Canada as they move forward. A lot of things have to happen. And along the way, of course, and I really like the quote from the Prime Minister that you just showed, we want to make sure that the men and women in uniform get the equipment they need. So this is an industrial strategy, but we at times are going to have to go and partner up, buy equipment from others, and sometimes that's going to be American equipment, because these very expensive weapon systems, once you've bought them, you have them for decades, and we have.
And so there's some points there, right? And it's, again, this whole like 70% within this country, this, that, the other. And the problem with that too is like awards 70% of federal defense contracts to Canadian firms is there are very few Canadian firms that do this type of work. So, or there are firms that claim to be Canadian, but a lot of their work is interspersed and they work closely with American counterparts. So it's hard to tell and how to track what's going to be Canadian and what's not. And that's kind of a lot of the issue that people are having with this. And so it's a lot of what was announced is, trying to make it look a specific way to encourage people, like, look at what we're doing. Well, like the Hodgson situation we read about earlier, where he's like, we're going to hit our April 1st deadline on the pipeline, the MOU and all that. We're going to hit it. We're going to hit everything. We'll be watching this. And I know many of us who watch this show, especially I know as someone who lives out here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, have a lot of connections to those in the military, whether it be in the Navy or reserves, what have you. And we will see if that money ever really makes it. We'll see where it all goes. But anyways, I'll leave it there. However, we're going to end off with some super chats because, gee, I'm seeing some things pop off. And Portuguese Pie's in the chat too. Let's go. Shout out Portuguese Pie. Let's go. I'm seeing people yelling at you for not putting out enough content lately, man. Come on. Step up your game. No, I'm just kidding. You're doing great. Doing awesome. Let's pull up these super chats. Come on. There it is. Lazarus 8447 says libs get what they want. You will be a broke country. Carney will be filthy rich, and he'll piss off, and our economy will be gone. Jobs all down south, and America will take us over long before China does. Too many have TDS. You are definitely entitled to that. There's definitely concerns about that for sure, right? It's the fact that we're being taken advantage of, and people don't realize they're being taken advantage of, and that's why I keep pushing and do what I'm doing to try and keep shifting that. And I do believe there has been a significant shift, and there has significant conversations that we are moving in a positive direction. I think there's a little bit of a setback right now, but it'll come around. Mark Lomblanco says again, Carney to increase Canadian defense industry revenues by over 240% with a target of 70% of defense acquisitions awarded to Canadian firms driven by increased R&D investment. Yes, exactly. Spot on. And Homebred Cat, 7. Holy jumping, dude.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Not only does this man gift, or woman, whoever it could be, gift all of you guys memberships to this channel, which huge thank you for that. Drops $200 there. And let's make sure I come to their actual chats here. Oh, that was you just dropped $200 because you felt like it. That's crazy. Well, thank you so much. Mark Lomblanco says, I'm feeling very sad for Canada watching Carney bringing down these roads when it's clearly not worth the plan to do so. There's plenty of wealth south of the border for you to take. Yeah, you're starting to sound like Kevin O'Leary now. You said something like that the other day too. Holy jumping. Homebred Cat drops $50 on the show. Holy smokes. My gosh, just going off over here. This is psychotic, man. What are we doing here? There's make sure. Oh, smokes. And Portuguese Pie says, haha, yeah, long weekend for me. The long weekend fried me. Have to get back into it. Great show this morning as usual. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Much appreciated all around. Trying to get back to, so Homebred Cat just dropped $450, actually technically $450 in super chats, and then an extra $50 in membership fees, or 50. Like that's, what's going on? That's crazy. Who is this person, man? Holy jumping. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Jessica says in the general chat, give your support to Don Cherry. Give your support to Don Cherry. Especially the way he was treated and on his way out. He needs some love before he eventually ends up expiring. But so people should know on this side. People should know, even though he got completely ousted in unceremonious fashion, people should know on this side of the dirt that the impact they had and show that encouragement. Absolutely. He was the man. He was a wild man, but he was a man. That's for sure. Holy jumping. We'll leave it there, folks, because in about 35 minutes, Team Canada will be taking to the ice. So that'll be fascinating to see the men take on their first quarterfinal match, see how that all goes with the Czech Republic, or Czechia, I should say. Should be good. But whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, Sweden sucks. Screw Sweden. And that's out of context of the whole curling situation. And so, yeah. I get very Team Canada when it comes to sports real quick. I'll say that much. I'm going to leave it there. Whatever he's doing, wherever you are, I love you. I'm out. Peace.